In this video, I'm going to give an honest insight into greenwashing, talk to you about a growing cultural shift that I perceive happening regarding fear in the UK, and invite you to have some difficult conversations. I've been holding back on publishing this because, as you'll see by the end of this video, I'm going to be brutally honest with you and start an honest conversation about a topic a lot of people don't usually want to talk about. All with a view to shifting the conversation from a place of insecurity to one of greater confidence, of greater empathy and critical reflection. In fact, it's the avoidance of this conversation that I think is holding us back and keeping us stuck in a lot of our collective problems. You'll notice that I'm reading this. I like to write, and so in this video I'm going to read out loud something I wrote at the end of last week, so forgive me if you can see me reading. I'm recording it as a video because lots of people prefer it to reading long articles. So let's get started. So what kicked this off was looking at the news around recent EU voting on greenwashing, indicating the coming of a new legislative environment in which claims made by brands will need to be backed with scientific evidence. A whole new world of verification and enforcement awaits. For some brands, this is a victory to celebrate. Others will want to say even less on the topic for fear of screwing up. And in this video, I argue that the answer for brands wanting to communicate their values and activities relating to sustainability lies not in regulation, as welcome as it may be, but in understanding the fears of their audiences through difficult but incredibly meaningful and important conversations. The kinds of conversations that require patience and a deep desire to listen before you speak, because, as you're no doubt already keenly aware, when we think someone is thinking something they are not, our message fails to land, and our projections of our faulty assumptions will have fooled us. And the same thing happens in greenwashing. Marketers' insecurities and assumptions, and I include myself here as a marketer, I work in market research, our insecurities and assumptions about what others think get projected onto audiences, and a false pressure builds to grandstand and appear more sustainable than we really are. Overzealous boasting, as it were, from this understanding could be seen as a product of insecurity. Greenwashing is easy to dismiss and vilify, but when we look at it for what it really is, it has an incredibly important lesson within it about how and why people act as they do. When it comes to greenwashing, there are clear insecurities being projected by brands and marketers onto the assumed other of their audiences. It's these projections that I want to address in this video to help shift the conversation of communicating sustainability and climate change to a place of honesty, integrity, and truthfulness. Not just because, by definition, it helps to avoid greenwashing, but because it's also incredibly effective and in huge demand, which I'll explain later. So one of these projections is shallow and one of them deep. The most obvious and shallow projection is that some marketers look around the shared context of marketing land, where there are perhaps too few open conversations about the scale of the Metacrisis, its ramifications, and how it makes us feel. And even though those of us in those spaces know something is wrong, we don't share just how wrong we think things are, because no one else is. We then falsely assume that the target audience don't have these thoughts and feelings either, when in fact, as mounting evidence from 2023 suggests, see the notes for the sources, they do. This kind of trap is called pluralistic ignorance. It's the name for the situations we get stuck in because everyone falsely assumes that everyone else is thinking something they're not. It takes a brave soul to burst the bubble of pluralistic ignorance, but when they do, we're all relieved. It's a trap at play, according to the Soviet writer Alexei Yerchak, or so I found through Brian Eno, with cultural shifts too. Yerchak argues that cultural shifts happen in two phases. First, when everyone realizes that something is wrong, and then finally, when everyone realizes that everybody else realizes that something is wrong. Those of us not having conversations about how we really feel about the mounting crises we are facing play along with the ignorance. pushing our own discomfort to one side when ironically it turns out that everyone else is feeling the same way too. It's just that no one is saying it because no one wants to be the one to break the social illusion we've all been creating together. No one wants to really, truly, deeply admit it. Least of all, in marketing land, the Wonka-esque creative factory of wildest dreams and happy endings where we try to keep it light. Greenwashing stops the moment we're ready to be honest with ourselves and each other and listen to and respect how people are really feeling out there, which, from what we've seen in our work over 2023, can increasingly be summed up in one word: scared. Greenwashed marketing, like so much pluralistic ignorance, is a product of insecurities and our untested assumptions. And marketers who wake up and challenge those assumptions are likely to be met with great relief by their audiences, creating greater connection and appreciation. Those that don't are more likely, I would assume, to be called out for being inauthentic, for bending the truth, and for barefaced lying because deep down they want the lie more than they want the truth. Maintaining the lie means they don't have to change. Not deeply, not profoundly, just a little. And there's a little bit of that in all of us. It's a kind of soft denial and no doubt serves a function in keeping us sane. The desire for the lie gets projected onto others, onto audiences, some of whom want it too, some of whom get persuaded to want it, whilst others run from it. As the evidence for climate impacts around the globe increase, the numbers running are steadily growing. The inauthenticity becomes obvious and repellent. This preference for the lie over the truth, this soft denial, is the deeper, far more unconscious projection. It's the scarier one of the two. For this reason, greenwashing can be seen as a case study in what marketing looks like in a time of metacrisis. It looks a lot like the marketers that make it, uncertain, insecure, and a bit delusional. That's not an insult, it's a mercy. It's a delusion ultimately worthy of love, because deep down it comes from fear. A fear of facing a difficult truth. A fear of breaking a long-established and enjoyed social cohesion. A fear of questioning the shared illusion that keeps us feeling safe. A fear of ridicule and of judgment too. Behind that fear is a desire for continued connection, for things to stay the same because we love them as they are and we don't want things to fall apart. It's a fear we can all understand. If only we all knew that we're not the only ones. Ironically, the fear of things falling apart is the same force that limits our ability to prevent them from falling apart. It locks us in, it paralyzes. What a great irony then that we seem to create exactly what we do not want when we act out of fear in the pursuit of what we do. Deep down, we all want the same things. The greenwashing marketer, the climate denier, the activist blocking the road, and the 25-year-old woman questioning if she should even have kids at a time like this. We all just want to be okay. And we all have different ways of dealing with the fear of not being okay, especially when the not being okay seems existential in nature. Some seek to honestly and lovingly delude ourselves with our best intentions at heart, trying in earnest to push the fear away and maintain a sense of security. But gradually the evidence mounts up and the old beliefs struggle to assimilate it all. We look around and start to notice the growing number of storms, the droughts, the floods, the rising food prices, the empty shelves, the strikes, the wars. We wonder why things are not as we would want them, why the wildfires are burning, why there is soon to be more plastic in the ocean than fish, why people seek to move north as the climate niche suitable for agricultural civilization shrinks, leaving people unable to grow food or access water. And the answer is simple. Because in trying to do things better, to keep things going, to sustain what we have, we fail to acknowledge the need to do better things entirely. Unconsciously, we've been acting out of hidden guilt, fear and shame because we haven't confronted our fear. We've not yet moved upstream to where all our problems lie. In us, in our framing, our beliefs, and what Herman Daly calls our pre-analytic vision. Fear stops us going there, but eventually we will have no choice but to. Some of us just let the fear simmer there in the background, knowing it ourselves but not sharing it with others in an attempt to keep it small. I meet people like this all the time. Much of my job is in having difficult conversations like this. I'm a market researcher. We focus on understanding behaviours relating to sustainability and climate change, so I have these conversations quite a lot. The more I engage with this topic, the more I find myself listening to people's fears as well as their greatest loves. I've realised the importance of creating a space for people to feel safe to share like this because they see my willingness to go there with them. Having these conversations seems to help them, difficult as they are. The shoulders come down, the sighs come out, and there is an undeniable relief. Finally, someone is listening to me. I'm not the only one. Finally, a relief from the tension of this cognitive dissonance. I found these conversations by accident, and it's having the conversations that have shown me this way of seeing things. I got this from others, and I'm deeply grateful for that. And these are the gifts of the work that I do, having these moments with people that just feel so real. And what I see is startling. 2023 showed me that there is a growing portion of the population across demographics who realise the existential nature of the crises we face, and they know with growing clarity that there isn't going to be a Hollywood ending, that there's no superhero waiting to save the day. Some see conspiracy, some see incompetence, some see a kind of evolutionary dead end. Deniers or doomers, people are responding to some significant shifts in our world. They're looking at them through different lenses of belief, making meaning with different narratives, but the end state is the same. Unmet emotional needs for agency, connection, meaning and purpose that go beyond feelings of just lack or anger and instead reside in fear. Now, it wasn't that long ago that people's fears and concerns were being ignored at scale. And then Brexit happened. Trump happened. This rising sense of fear about the future, it can go in many different ways. It doesn't necessarily translate into action on climate. It could go anywhere, depending on the leadership that's around or the absence of it, the narratives that are offered in terms of how to deal with that fear. The classic move is to offer control, take back control, make America great again. All these different offers of control in a context of fear are incredibly persuadable and powerful. Many of the people I've met are happy to offer their take. They're keen to show that they know how deep this goes, how difficult this situation is, what a complete and total mess they think it has become. And in this context, after hearing how their experiences of 40-degree days in London have affected their choices of flats, of having kids, of relocating, of wanting to grow their own food, of feeling a powerful nostalgia for times that weren't ever their own, but that looked so much safer than the here and now, brands that greenwash in that context just feel so completely out of touch. Because greenwashing claims about the power of a FMCG product to save the planet in the context of a metacrisis could be seen for what they really are. They're juvenile and delusional when they needn't be. They're delusional because the difficult conversation hasn't happened. So we just project our own insecurities and perpetuate the pluralistic ignorance. Older audiences are either so locked into their beliefs, the ones that have rewarded them so incredibly well in material terms, that they can't see any problem at all. Or they feel an unconscious sense of guilt and shame that things have gone south on their watch, and they channel this energy into domestic consumptive habits because they lovingly swallowed the responsibilities placed upon them and on all of us by marketers on the fossil fuel playbook that it is their carbon footprint, our carbon footprints, that are the problem and the solution. And while we all want to do our part, and that is an important aspect of all of this, emphasis on individual consumptive actions alone is an obfuscation and misdirection that the under 40s are more critical of. Unfortunately, to the point that some under 24s aren't bothering to recycle at all. Younger audiences are much more likely to understand the connections between so many of our problems, to understand the roles of power, culture, and identity. This shocked me when I first saw it. Running focus groups with people in their 20s about these topics, and it didn't matter what level of education they had. They were aware of the intricacies of power and of culture. They see the impacts of greed and inequality. They see the systemic nature of our crises. They see the loss of connection with nature and the important things in life. And they feel completely overwhelmed with what they're inheriting, leaving many to wonder, what's the point? That overwhelm is a cry for love, a cry for some kind of control, which, if ignored, leads to feeling completely powerless, where giving up seems like the best course of action, even on themselves, to the point of self-harm. Eco-anxiety can be understood in many ways, but one interpretation that is growing in resonance for me is an unmet need for control and agency in a context of deep uncertainty, powerlessness, and existential threat. Those that see the scale of the problems and the lack of leadership often then find themselves trapped in a paradox of survival arising from two competing and intertwined narratives. One is the need to maintain the pluralistic ignorance, to keep the shared illusion going, to play along and accept their inheritance in order to pay the rent, in order to live what they have been raised to believe is a good life, to have the things, do the things, go to the places that we all aspire to continue to be a part of the systems that sustain us. The other narrative is one of collapse, of the need to abandon the whole project because of a growing belief that continued participation in these systems will threaten their ability to live a good life. A paradoxical trap that feels like checkmate. It's an understanding that the systems that have sustained us all this time and conferred such great evolutionary advantage are turning on us and threatening our survival when scaled too high. The more we invest in such systems, the more we seek to grow and scale, the faster we break planetary boundaries and set off cascades of climate tipping points that lock in mass extinction. For some, the cognitive dissonance of staying in the pluralistic ignorance is too strong, and they jump into the unknown because the fear of staying as they are is greater than their fear of not knowing where they will land. They find others like them and find solace in connection. They block roads, they disrupt, they kick and scream and shout and get vilified as a result. They've broken the social promise. They've refused to suspend their disbelief for the good of the whole. They've threatened cohesion and safety. They're accused of being ungrateful for all that sustains them. They're also canaries down the coal mine. Canaries that bite us in their efforts to alert us and wonder why we flinch. We need each other for survival. We need to be part of a system, in it together, because it feeds us and keeps us alive. And it is also true that our systems are now threatening all life on Earth. Trapped in this paradox, it's easy to believe that we're damned if we do and damned if we don't. But this belief is a faulty belief based on a false binary. We may know with increasing granularity just how damned we are if we don't change, but the only thing that keeps us from real change is a belief that we are damned if we do. And that is not the case. The damned if we do is a narrative the fossil fuel industry is investing a great deal of time and effort into at the moment. They've shifted from denying climate change to accepting it, albeit with diminished impact, and they're seeking to undermine any solutions offered to address it, all to the desired effect of keeping things the same. Fossil fuel industry propaganda feeds and maintains pluralistic ignorance. It perpetuates the dream that keeps us from confronting reality, and our media is awash in it, many times innocently so, and other times with malice from deeply vested interests. If we look at the work of clean creatives and others like them, the vast evidence for obfuscation and for outright manipulation of narratives through PR and marketing agencies by fossil fuel industry is to such a huge extent, and it's so ubiquitous and powerful that an argument can be made, I think, for saying that it undermines the whole notion of a democratic society. Because if the citizens cannot be properly informed, they cannot make proper democratic decisions. And this manipulation of propaganda within these public fora threatens the very nature of democracy itself. It breeds false assumptions about what other people are thinking and feeling, deliberately seeding and encouraging these false assumptions all around us. It comes from fear and a lack of willingness to confront it. Fear keeps us in the problem. Courage sets us free. Courage is created when we encourage each other instead of bringing others down. It takes commitment and authenticity. It takes leadership on a scale we've rarely seen before. So instead of a checklist for how to avoid greenwashing, I offer you the following. Whilst some run from fear, some let it simmer, and still more become consumed by it, there is another way. Study the fear and the grief. Listen to it. Learn from it, both your own and those of others. Go where the scared are too fearful to tread, and seek to see things as they are. Puncture the pluralistic ignorance and see whose faces light up with relief. Embrace the kind of change that comes from going on a journey despite not having a full understanding of the destination, and to do so anyway with incomplete maps. Because it is exactly this kind of change that is so desperately needed. It's the type of change that can only come from confronting fears, from accepting uncertainty and making accommodations in our worldviews for reality as it is, instead of seeking to distort it into something more palatable so that we can merely assimilate it into our pre-existing faltering paradigms. This kind of change is transformative, and our transformation is the social transformation that so many in sustainability have spent so long working so hard for. This is the invitation of our times, and it starts with honest conversations where no one is expected to have all the answers. And not everyone will feel like this. My argument here is not that this is the case for everybody, but that the numbers of people for whom this is the case have shifted and grown considerably, that there is now a larger part of our society that is experiencing this cultural shift regarding a fear about the future. What might seem like fringe ideas now will soon be more widespread. As more climate impacts take their toll, this pressure will rise and more people will seek to address it. Not by blocking roads or getting arrested, but by choosing between being overwhelmed and silent, or to find other people who feel the same and encouraging each other to do things differently. To encourage each other to have the audacity to imagine a different world. But that can't happen until that pluralistic ignorance is burst, which starts with difficult and honest conversations. It comes from admitting and confronting our fears and sharing them with others. It may seem that those of us born since the 1980s, when Professor James Hansen made it clear to the US Congress that we know only too well what it is that we're doing, that we've been born at a time between two worlds, two different paradigms, one now faltering, the other still emerging. Its full emergence, no doubt, an intergenerational project, much as many would wish it otherwise. As the boomers retire and Gen Alpha come of age, this shift will hold more prominence, and the historical significance of this moment cannot be overstated. As the book title goes, we're hospicing modernity. And perhaps as the work of people like Jonathan Rowson, Ian McGilchrist, Rupert Reed, Liam Kavanagh, Indra Adnan, Nate Hagans and Daniel Schmachtenberger suggest, we might even be breaking beyond modernity through post-modernity into the meta-modern age. In this context, there's much to be concerned about, but also an opportunity for a deep sense of meaning in the journey ahead, a journey whose destination only becomes a little clearer with each step we take. The gifts of this journey aren't received on arrival. Chances are it's a journey that will play out over generations. These kind of gifts aren't the kind that can be taken and kept through hard work, through some kind of exceptionalism, having reached the end first. They're something that we give to ourselves and to each other on the way. It's a journey fueled by our love for our children and for life itself. From what we've heard in our research, as differently as they are articulated, they often come down to exactly the same things. Tory or Labour, we want to feel safe and secure, to be healthy in body and mind, to have a place to call our own, and the ability to eat well, sleep well, and support a family. Climate denier or activist, we want to feel free, encouraged, and empowered, feeling that we have agency in the world, that we can create and be ourselves. Young or old, it's the ability to play and to be playful, to have fun for the sake of having fun, however we choose. Busy, executive, single mum, we want to feel satisfied, content, and fulfilled, to feel peace. Atheist or worshipper, it's the meaning and purpose we feel when we live in an alignment with our values and cherish our integrity, when we feel honest and authentic. Whether we're a teacher or a student, it's the feeling of being understood and of understanding others. It's feeling heard and seen. Whether we're introverts or extroverts, it's feeling that we belong, that we're appreciated, respected, and included. It's the connection we feel when our kids finally tell us their greatest fears and we listen as if they mean the world, because they do. It's the moments in our lives that feel completely real and free of artifice, where we feel our needs are met. So this journey, the journey ahead, it isn't about arriving at a destination. It's not about doing anything. It's about a way of being in the world. It's a collective remembering of how we're all the same in all our own unique ways. So if you want to avoid greenwashing, take a deep look at the world. Give your audience the love and respect both you and they deserve. Listen to them deeply. Have those difficult conversations and tell it like it is. The ending of the old and the beginning of something new. Because on the other side of the growing anxiety in our world is a new one waiting to be born. And honest conversations are the doorways that take us there. So thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. Like and subscribe to Teach the Algorithm to show you more stuff like this. If you want to start one of these conversations today, reach out to me. I'd love to help you. The best place to stay in touch and to message me is on LinkedIn. Just search for Rob Harrison-Plastow. But otherwise, I will see you next week in another video. And in the meantime, have a great day.